Hello and welcome to Unacademy. I welcome you all to the last session of our NCERT series, where we were covering class 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th class NCERT of the new NEP program, History of Arts. Now, this is the most controversial book out of this set because it was in the news because of the censorship of the dancing girl image. But in this version, as we have it here, that censorship did not go through. Now, by now, if you've not seen 6th, 7th, and 8th class, this is the most technical out of the four in that regard. And one section of this book is extremely relevant, extremely important for the examination, which is the history of arts as it is given in the NCERT itself. Now, if you want the PDF of this session, you will find it in this Telegram group. And we are running a very important offer right now, which is the Siksha Mahotsav, the triple treat offer, where you get CSC Assure also, you get double validity also, and you also get the least price possible. So if you have been contemplating to join Unacademy at any point of time, this may be the best time, and you have to use the code IS English to be attributed to our team. The Elevated batch is going to start very soon. Now, 6th, 7th, 8th, our focus was more on dances, the visual arts, theater, and music. However, in this book, the most important chapter is this one, which is History of Arts or Introduction to History of Arts. This in itself is a pure mains oriented area, and you can write multiple answers out of this chapter itself, a long chapter, 38 pages, but valuable. Other than that, I will also go through the other chapters, but as it seems, only the relevant portions I will discuss, not a lot relevant in these ones, but this is very, very important in that sense. So, the first thing is the chapter defines what is called as tangible and intangible heritage, something which mostly confuses students. UNESCO divides all forms of culture into tangible and intangible. Tangible heritage is physical, material. You can basically hold it, it's something which you can touch. Artifacts, artworks, manuscripts, musical instruments, clothing, jewelry, physical objects. On the other hand, intangible heritage is something as a tradition, oral tradition, a living tradition which is passed down vis-a-vis through the concept of performative arts. So, living expression, inherited, passed down to future generations through practice and through performance. So, for example, art, social practice, rituals, and the idea is very simple oral traditions. This has a physical form. This has a form which people take, which is you and me. I will pass down Bharatanatyam to you through the performance of it. Therefore, it is intangible. The skill is intangible. Here, it has a physical form. So, every skill has a physical form and you can say non physical form, tangible and intangible form. But here, we are celebrating the tangible forms. Here, we're celebrating the intangible performative aspects. Simple, straightforward, something which you can touch. The other one is a skill in that regard. Then, a very important table, because what it does is it compares cultural development in India and the world through four periods, which is basically the Mesolithic period till Indus Valley Civilization, Indus Valley Civilization till the 6th century BC, 6th century to 6th century, which is from Mahajanpada till Gupta, and from Gupta till medieval, which is 1200 C. Now, it tells us if you can remember this, generally you can answer any question on evolution, or if they ask you what is the contribution of a certain period, you can basically expand on these points and you will get an answer. For example, between 50,000 BC to 4000 BC, cave paintings in Bhimbetka, Lakhudiyar, Uttarakhand, MP were very, very important. Similarly, across the world, we find cave paintings in Indonesia, France, and Spain. At the same point of time, between 4000 BC to 500, which is from IVC till the point of Mahajanpadas, we have the Sindhu Saraswati, which is Indus Valley Civilization, pottery, jewelry, seals, bronze figurines, stone sculpture, and town planning, which is in itself a very interesting thing. And similarly, we will find similar aspects in Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, pottery, jewelry, and manuscripts. Then, this is the critical period because during this period of sixth century to 7th century, which is Mahajanpada till the end of the Gupta Empire, we see Lion capital, Stupa, Chaitya, Vihara, Mathura, Gandhara school, the Sarnath school. We find mural traditions, we find Stupa tradition, we find cave tradition, we find pillar tradition, we find also the mural tradition at Ajanta, Sita Vansal. We also find texts which basically talk about the different art forms. And at this point of time, China, Egypt, Greece, and Rome were the basic areas. Same type of understanding, which is painting, sculpture, architecture, theater, music, dance. Similarly, we have texts which are talking about it. But where the culture of India dominated was under the Cholas, and that is where rock cut and structural temples are going to become very common. Nagara style, Dravida style, Vesara style will develop. Chola bronze murals, manuscript paintings will start to spread. We have Sanskrit and Tamil drama and much more elaborate text on dance, music, and theater, what we had been discussing in the 6th, 7th, and 8th class NCERT. Now, at this same point of time, now the Buddhist and what is called as Indian culture will start to spread across Southeast Asia, and we'll get what is called as the Indo-China sector or the Indo-China culture itself. This is a glance based understanding, it's an overview. However, what the chapter does it is also breaks down each of these sectors. For example, it starts with discussing what is called as the timeless traditions of India and how mythology is remembered, how our traditions are remembered. So it talks about Shruti, Smriti, and timeless tradition. So I'll try to break it down for you. First thing, it talks about how Shruti tradition is the Vedas itself, transmitted in the form of Guru Shishya tradition, and emphasis on listening. The Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Dharma Shastras are Smriti tradition. They are passed down from one generation to other through narration, through performance. That is why they're Smriti, to be remembered, to be heard. Then you have what is called as a timeless tradition where different forms of performative arts can be seen as early as in, for example, in the yajna or the yagna rituals of the Vedic practices. We have in the Rig Veda the mention of Ushas arriving with a dancer itself. We have the Sam Veda, which talks about Indian musical tradition. We also have the seven notes and the three notes mentioned into it. And the Ramayana itself talks about how Love and Kush basically gave performed the Ramayana through the concept of drama, dance, and the poetic, what is called as narration. Similarly, Panini's Ashtadhyayi mentions the Kushilava tradition. Then the Mahabharata mentioned the Kathaka tradition itself, and earlier literature, the Sutradhars are considered. There was a question in the examination about the Suta Parampara. They asked Sutas and Magadhas what are they related to. So the Suta traditions, they used to narrate different stories, dialogues, and epics in that regard. Even the Puranas have reference to art forms. Further, the Mahabharata, we have reference to a narrator. Shiva is seen as to be the lord of dance itself. We have Lord Krishna talked about as Murlidhar, the one who plays the flute itself. Ravan was known to have been a very good veena player. We have celestial beings who are known to have danced. The Mahabharata even talks about Arjun and how there was a dancing teacher there. And therefore, what this section establishes is that our literature tradition has multiple references to arts in the form of music, dance, drama, everything else. And therefore it is very clear that we have a very rich culture from Mahabharata to Shruti tradition to the Smriti tradition. In the Vedas we have reference here. In the Smriti tradition we have reference of what is called as dance and drama. So it talks about the timeless traditions and how our literature embodies all of these things. At the same point of time, now it enters into a breakdown of each of these periods. For example, between Mesolithic and IVC, it emphasizes on, and this is where the evolution aspect comes through. You can get questions in the examination based on this understanding also. The first thing which they talk about is that as there's no writing, the cave painting tradition of Bhimbetka, of Lakhudiyar, and other caves in Andhra Pradesh are the first artistic representation. How art evolved. So it talks about Bhimbetka and the paintings which are represented, and the use of red, white, yellow color. The paintings depict interconnected themes itself, and Lakhudiyar has close to 1 lakh caves, which again represent the mundane life. So the first expression is painting. Is painting. Globally, also the same thing is happening. We have painting traditions in the form of cave paints. So painting is the first expression during the prehistoric to the protohistoric period. Then this is the controversial image which had been censored. Now it is not censored, which was a victory for the historians and the academic community. But between IVC and Mahajanpadas, now they talk about the different expressions of art. For example, here they talk about the earliest script, which has not been deciphered till this point, bronze figuring in the form of the lost wax technique used in the bronze dancing girl itself. It further talks about similar traditions in Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, and writing cuneiform, which is the first writing, the original script, which is the Mesopotamian script, which was actually deciphered, has been deciphered. But remember, when we talk about the IVC, I'm adding information here for you. Ceatite, terracotta, copper, bronze, gold, silver, everything was used for craft specialization, and bead, seal, you name it, and they were doing it. Even cotton textile was produced during this period. Then, this is the period in which Buddhism, Jainism is also going to rise. The expressions are going to become even more diverse. For example, we start to now get important texts related to arts at this point of time. For example, Natya Shastra of Bhartamuni. We have Vishnu Purana of Chaitra Sutra, containing the Chaitra Sutra, which is the Chitra Sutra, which is basically the painting sutra. And we have Shila Padikaram, written by Edigal, which is considered to be a very important text for South Indian arts. Now, why is Natya Shastra important? Because earliest treatise on Indian arts, information on technique of drama, dance, music, and visual arts, and the most important contribution is the Ras theory, the three bhavs and the three ras which are talked about. So now from the Mahajanpada phase, if you don't know the timeline of the Indian subcontinent, and you can say you don't have an understanding of historical timelines itself, I have done a video on what is the timeline. You can watch that also. Now, Mahajanpadas till Gupta, we have first texts. Then, second expression is cave architecture and stupa with the rise of Buddhism and Jainism. Chaityas, which are prayer halls, stupas, which are monuments which commemorate the death of Buddha or Buddha himself. The viharas, which are monastic establishments, can be seen in Barabar, in Bharut, Vidisha, Vaishali, Udaygiri, Khandiri, Sarnath, Kushinagar, the Amravati, Ajanta, and Ellora sector. Now they will say, is there any other expression? Yes, in this period, there is one more expression, which is the rock cut pillars, which are the monolithic pillars which are created with symbolic meaning. The Sarnath pillar, the most important, which has a lot of Buddhist symbols which we use as the Government of India emblem also. This is where you can see it is talking about the different components. First component is text, second component is cave architecture and stupa, third component is the concept of pillars which were erected. Similarly, it gives the Vaishali lion, the Rampurva lion, Sankisa elephant, and the Rampurva bull, telling us each has their own theory and understanding. The fourth expression during this period are the schools, the Sarnath, Mathura, Amravati, and Gandhara school of arts, which produced iconic images of Buddha, Yakshas, Yakshis, and they've given a very interesting table where they've differentiated. For example, Sarnath school uses Chunar sandstone, body proportion are idealized, clinging drapery, drapes, and spiritual expression. Mathura school is known for, as we know, the red spotted sandstone, body is round, expressive eyes. Gandhara, we know Hellenistic influence, which is Roman sculpture, wavy hair, facial features, flowing robes, postures, realistic anatomy. And you have the Sarnath, which is again Chunar. This is a repetition. This should have been Amravati. Amravati is greenish sandstone, and it is known for Hinayanic, Hinayanic Buddhism and the representation of Buddha through symbols. This is basically a typo in the text itself. Then, by the time this is basically post Gupta, a post Maurya. So this is post Maurya basically. This is Maurya, and this was Mahajanpada. Now we enter Gupta. When we enter Gupta, we get the fifth expression, which is now the Puranas, Bhagavatism, Hinduism affecting the concept of imagery itself, and the iconography now is related to the Dashavatars of Lord Vishnu, and temple building is going to start. When temple building is going to start in stupa in the Gupta period, the stupa architecture will fade away, but temple architecture will now represent multiple different forms of arts, and that is what they are talking about evolution. Gupta period, we have Dashavatar iconography. Gupta period is also known, this was five, is also known for the coins which were there. Numismatics reaches to its highest point with regards to Samudragupta playing the Veena itself, and it talks about how this is the zenith point in that regard. Now, it goes back to this period of 6th century BCE and then goes forward with regards to the seventh expression, which is painting tradition. So physical, tangible traditions, it has all talked about. I hope that you understand. It is basically how it works is you have the stupa, chaitya, vihara tradition. Then you have the pillar tradition along with it. Along with that, you move to the what is called as Gandhara, Amravati, and the Mathura school. Then you move to temple architecture and Puranic iconography. Previous to that, it was cave. From cave, it moved into IVC based understanding. From IVC based to move to this sector. Now, it goes back in time to explain to us that painting tradition, mural traditions were very, very important. In Ajanta, Ellora, we find beautiful paintings which were created in Maharashtra, in Sitan Vansal caves in Tamil Nadu. The representation is again post Gupta. First set of, you can say, caves we find during the Satvahana period in that regard. And we have representation of even the Chitra Sutra as mentioned in these walls itself. The Jataks were also a very important source of the paintings itself. Then, seventh, eighth, major development which is going to happen in the Gupta and late Gupta period, specifically under Samudragupta and Chandragupta, is going to be Chandragupta to Vikramaditya, is going to be very important texts emerging. For example, Panchtantra, which have music, dance, drama inside them, of Vishnu Sharma, important for the examination. Then we have obviously Amrapali, which is in the Therighatha text of the Buddhist itself. Malvika Mitra in Kalidasa. Urvashi in Vikramashavyam in Kalidasa, and Vasanta Sena in Mrichkatikam of Sudraka. This is very, very, very important. We have seen previous year questions out of the same personalities and out of the same texts previously. So please, 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 they are talking about characters, but we have to remember the text also. Very important text set. Further, now it moves to the post Gupta period. Post Gupta period, it talks about, I'll give you an overview of all of this in the end, don't worry. Post Gupta period, they talk about bhakti, how the Allavar and Nayanar tradition impacted dance, drama traditions, bhajan, kirtan, and how the devotional aspect came into music, dance, and drama. They talked about how the bhakti parampara affected the temples, temple architecture, and also the temple imagery iconography. And then they go to the Cholas. Most important contribution in the post Gupta period is Chola. Here they talk about how Cholas basically constructed multiple temples and dancers, court dancers were given patronage. 9th century Chera king is mentioned of crediting reconstructing Kudiyattam, which is a very important Sanskritic form, important. Then again, important treatises which were written during this period about art is mentioned. For example, you have the Sangeet Markantra by Narada. You have the Brihadeshi by Matang Muni. Further, you have the mention of Brihadeshi because it talks about the different classical and pan classical traditions. It talks about the Sangeeta with regards to the Indian classical music tradition, Ras, and everything. Then it talks about the Abhinav Bharati by Abhinav Gupta, commentary on Natya Shastra, important. This is very important. Literature is always important for the examination. Then you have the Natak Lakshana Rajoksha or Natruksha, which is by Saranganadi. Then you have the Dashrupaka by Danayana, and this talks about dramatic structures and character types. This talks about structure, theme, and character. Further, you have the Abhinay Darpan by Nandikeshwar. We've discussed this previously in the 6th, 7th class, 8th class NCERT. And it talks about how Abhinay comes through. Then it talks about how Rashtrakutas Rashtrakutas basically are the zenith of temple construction in the form of the Kailashnath temple, which is a monolithic basaltic temple carved out of one whole, you can say, structure itself, one whole hill itself. Then it talks about the inscriptions which talk about musical instruments, musical aspects, ras, and rock relief, which also capture the different forms of arts. The last thing which is expressed for Chola is obviously bronze sculpture, and how the most iconic, the Tandav dance, or what is called the Shiv Tandava Nataraja Chola period bronze statue, is considered to be very important. This can come in the PCS examination. Some people have asked the iconography. What does it mean? What is in the left hand? What is in the right hand? ROI is low, but you can remember it, what it means per se. At least Ring of Fire, five cosmic, the flying hair, right foot, left foot, you should remember. Then the, you can say, last expression which happens before 1200 is in the form of manuscript paintings, which happens under the Palas. This is called Pala Buddhist Vajrayanic, you can say, expression. This is Tara, and how you have the Gilgit manuscripts of Kashmir, which is one of the first example of bridge bark, along with how we get the Sharda script out of it. Further, we get the Palas, you can say, inscriptions on bridge bark, but with beautiful paintings in that regard. And last but not the least, which they talk about, is the living traditions which are created thereafter. Now, before I move on, I would like to survey all of this. I know it's a lot of information. See, the division is Mesolithic to IVC, IVC to Mahajanpadas, and from there, Mahajanpadas to Gupta, from Post-Gupta till the concept of medieval, which is 1200. Now, what is the expression here? It is cave painting. Then for IVC, they talk about bronze sculpture, but bronze, ceatite, terracotta, everything is there. For Mahajanpada, they now start to talk about stupa, chaitya, vihara, the concept of pillar architecture, and that is where basically we transition here. We have pillar for Mauryas. We have the concept of Gandhara, Mathura, Amravati school for the post Maurya. Gupta, we have iconography of the Puranas, temple building, and temple building becomes important in that period. Again, for painting, we have mural tradition here. Mural tradition falls under the post Maurya period, and in that, it also talks about how there are multiple texts which are produced during this phase, second, the third, and the fourth phase. The texts are mentioned. Plus, you have bronze sculpture by the Cholas, plus what is called as the idea of one second, the idea of Pala bridge bark representation. So you can see each of these periods is detailed analysis is given, and they tell you what is the evolution in that period. Kailasanata temple also falls here. So this is a very important chapter, a very important sector, gives us a lot of information. Then the chapter moves on to Dokra casting, important. And then we move to the music section. Dance, drama, tradition. This chapter itself, 38 pages, is very, very important. It gives us a lot of information. You have to concentrate here itself. You have to make sure that you don't miss any details here. Thereafter, it gives the difference of classical, folk, and popular music, how rag, tals, melodies are very important. Community based understanding is there, and filmy music is nothing but hybrid. And then it gives you an example of how these three interact with each other. For example, we have popular song with classical, where we have film songs based on ragas. We have folk mixing with classical, where we have folk songs with based on ragas. We have devotional along with the aspect of or popular with folk, which is again music in cinema. This is a very interesting concept. But the most important, you can say, two slides of music is one, this one, which is how Indian diasporic population took Indian music abroad in the form of music migration. And it talks about chutney music, which is basically the creolized music form which came up in the Caribbean islands because a lot of Indians migrated as indentured labor from Bihar, Uttar Pradesh to Caribbean islands. Over a period of time, Bhojpuri folk music, bhajan instruments like dholak blended with Caribbean style and created soca and calypso, and these are called as the Creole Bhojpuri Hindi English music, which is called as chutney music because coming from the sector where chutney is produced and chutney is consumed, chutney music. So this is very important because it is an example of international relations with music. This is the last thing which I would like to emphasize on, which is the different renditions of the Ramayana in different countries, telling you how Indian culture went abroad. So in Thailand, Java, Bali, Myanmar, Indo, Philippines, Laos, and Cambodia, we have different local names from the for the Ramayana tradition. But as I said, the most important aspect is evolution here. Then you also have examples of different visual art forms. Here, for example, Raja Ravi Verma, Nanlal Bose, Abhinavanath Tagore are talked about. Further, in sculpture, we have mention of multiple different personalities, Padma Shri, Padma Vibhushan. Similarly, in heritage craft, Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay is considered very important. She is also mentioned here. And in the dance chapter, there's mention to something called the Chatur Vidya Abhinay, which is four types of ras, which is the Angika, the Vachitrika, Arya, and Satvika. You just have to remember that there are four types of communication, expressive communication through dance forms. Again, I know that it is overwhelming. What to do with this information? Remember, the evolution part is very, very important. UPSC is asking period based questions also. Emphasize on that. Note down the expressions as I have done. Note down the name of the text because it is very important. Other than that, if you can emphasize and learn this NCRT is sorted for you and your job is done. So I hope that this helped you now contextualize Madhurima. Don't get caught up in the book itself. All of this is the most relevant information for you for UPSC. So thank you. Take care. I hope that you like this series and we will bring more. But if you want something else, you have to comment in the comment section and also like the video. Thank you. Take care. Bye.